Lame Zone Eternal is not just a store, it is a symbol of power and class. Located in one of the most prestigious neighborhoods in New York, Fifth Avenue, where towering skyscrapers and expensive brands merge into a lavish space where only those who can afford it can step in, Lame Zone Eternal is more than just a high-end store. It is a world, a closed universe of luxury products, where each item holds not only material value, but also symbolizes a lifestyle that everyone desires, but not everyone can achieve. Each item in the store is carefully displayed as a work of art. Haute couture dresses by the world's most famous designers, luxurious Birkin bags, expensive crocodile leather shoes. All are witnesses to success and power. The customers who enter here are not just shopping. They come to prove their place in society, to confirm that they have reached a peak that few can attain. And in this mysterious world where money and fame rule everything, Isabelle Duval and Chloe Martin stand as gatekeepers, guarding this space from those deemed unworthy. They are not just sales assistants, they are supervisors classifying customers from the first glance. No one can enter without being judged, classified, and assigned to one of two groups: those who truly have money and deserve these items, and those who are only here to look, nothing more. Isabelle Duval, with porcelain skin and long, shiny brown hair, always maintains a flawless appearance. She dresses meticulously, wearing luxurious designer outfits that hug her body, with high heels that highlight her graceful figure. Every time she walks past the display counter, each step seems to carve an impression of elegance and perfection into the ground. Isabelle has an undeniable pride, a self-assurance that she knows she deserves. She always feels that she is an indispensable part of this world, the world of those who have reached the pinnacle of wealth and power. Over the years working at Lame Zone Eternal, Isabelle has created a very clear system for classifying customers. Every time a customer enters the store, from their appearance, the way they walk, how they hold their bag, to the style of their clothes, Isabelle can instantly assess which category they belong to. She can tell whether the person is a famous businessman, a movie star, or just a regular person from a wealthy family, but not elegant enough to deserve to step into this space. Whenever Isabelle sees someone dressed out of style or carrying a bag that looks fake, she immediately turns her back and continues her work without paying any attention. She considers it an insult to this space, a space that only those with taste and elegance can truly understand and appreciate. Isabelle's sense of self-satisfaction is never disrupted because she believes that only people like her can truly understand the real value of these items. She sees herself as a controller of this world, and everything must conform to the standards she has set. Next to Isabelle is Chloe Martin, a woman with a more approachable appearance, with light skin and lightly curled hair, yet no less sharp and refined. Chloe does not stand out like Isabelle, but she has a deep understanding of customers and an exceptional ability to determine who could potentially become a buyer. Chloe speaks less than Isabelle, but her eyes are always observing people, like an automatic scanner, always ready to identify and analyze any customer who walks into the store. Chloe is very skilled at reading customer psychology from the first glance. She knows who will only come to look around, and who genuinely intends to spend money on luxury items. Chloe can even guess whether a person has enough financial capacity to afford a Birkin bag, just by how they hold their wallet and the amount of money they carry. For Chloe, classifying customers is not just a job, it's an art, and she takes pride in this ability. Both Isabelle and Chloe live in a world of perfection. They believe that everything has value, and that wealth can only come from the great products the store offers. Expensive handbags, haute couture dresses, shoes from famous designers, all are symbols of success for those who have achieved everything they want. In the eyes of Isabelle and Chloe, those who step into the store but are not classy enough will always remain outsiders, unworthy of entering this space. Therefore, they do not care about ordinary customers, those who dress simply, who do not have expensive designer items. They are not concerned with whether these customers bring in sales or not. For them, beauty and true value are not measured by money or products, but by the sophistication and aura the customer brings. and they have lived this way for many years, feeling like the great overseers of an unbreachable luxurious empire. That day, the Lame Zone Eternal store retained its usual elegant quietness. The lights from the crystal chandeliers illuminated the luxurious space, highlighting the expensive handbags and haute couture dresses displayed as works of art. Isabel and Chloe, as always, stood behind the counter, carefully observing the customers who entered, their eyes scanning the details of their outfits, guessing whether they could afford the items in the store. However, the automatic glass door opened, and a woman walked in, causing the lavish atmosphere to come to a sudden halt for a moment. Mila, a black woman with smooth coffee-colored skin, entered the store dressed simply yet with an invisible charm that was completely different from the usual customers Isabel and Chloe had attended to. Mila wore a simple light blue dress, soft fabric gently hugging her body without any ostentation. The dress was not from famous designers but from a mainstream brand, yet it fit perfectly, exuding the simple beauty of a woman confident in herself. There were no sparkling metallic accents, no dazzling luxury outfits, just a modest piece of clothing that clearly represented comfort and freedom in her choice. Mila's hair was natural, neatly curled, cascading in a way that was both seductive and simple. Her eyes were bright and deep, holding a world of their own, and her gaze seemed capable of seeing through dull appearances without needing to speak. Every step she took in the store radiated inner strength, not through showiness or material wealth, but through an unspoken confidence that no one could imitate. As soon as she entered, Isabel's eyes couldn't help but glance over. She assessed Mila from the first look. No designer outfit, no famous handbag, no dazzling appearance that Isabel was used to with regular customers. Mila looked like an ordinary person, from her attire to her demeanor, everything simple, with no pretensions. But it was this simplicity that made Isabel feel a bit uneasy. Mila did nothing unusual, no actions or words to draw attention, but her eyes were deep, as if observing everything with a calm strength. It seemed as though nothing could disturb her confidence. In this luxurious space, where everything seemed clearly defined, where people had to carry the material signs of wealth, Mila felt like a disturbance, a rising wave in an otherwise calm world. Isabel took a deep breath and returned to her work. She couldn't let this unease influence her for too long. However, Chloe couldn't help but notice Mila as she walked in. She glanced at her from head to toe, then immediately assessed her in the usual way Chloe did with other customers. She's probably just here to look around. Mila's appearance was far from the store's standard. Her simple dress, natural hair, and most of all, the absence of expensive designer items. Mila seemed in no rush, unhurried. She walked gently along the shelves, her eyes scanning each handbag, each outfit, but not lingering too long on any one item. The way she walked made Isabel feel something strange, as if nothing around her mattered, and everything was just part of a picture she had already seen. Mila seemed to be somewhere beyond this material world, where handbags or designer goods didn't define a person's worth. She stopped in front of a special handbag, placed in the store's restricted area. This was a bag by a famous designer, worth tens of thousands of dollars, and the only one the store had in its collection. Mila reached out her hand, lightly gliding over the leather of the bag, as if it were not a luxury item, but a work of art. Her gesture was very gentle, full of respect and affection, but not at all ostentatious. Isabel began to feel a bit uncomfortable. She realized she couldn't predict anything about this woman. Mila wasn't like the customers Isabel usually encountered, those who would constantly praise the products, then pick what they felt was worthy of their value. Mila seemed uninterested in the material value of this handbag. She simply stood there, feeling the material, her gaze fixed on it, as if searching for something that couldn't be measured by money. When Mila turned back and looked at Isabel, her eyes brightened, as if she were ready to engage in some conversation, yet without needing words. Isabel noticed the calmness and confidence in the way Mila looked at her. She wasn't the type of customer who would wait for Isabel to offer or advertise the product. She didn't demand attention, didn't need any invitations. Just that powerful look made Isabel feel compelled to pay attention. Mila spoke in a soft, yet clear voice. Thank you. I just wanted to look around. I don't think I'll buy this bag. This statement surprised Isabel, not because Mila wasn't purchasing, but because of the way she spoke. There was no hesitation, no shyness. To Isabel, this was someone who wasn't here to prove anything, yet had a powerful attraction that was unexplainable. She was like a silent wall, firm yet unwavering, not needing to do much, but still causing everything to stop. Chloe glanced over, seemingly a little impatient, but then returned to her work. She saw nothing special about this woman. But Isabel, after looking at her again, began to feel something shift in her thoughts. She couldn't quite understand what she was thinking about Mila, but clearly, she was an enigma, and that made Isabel feel uncomfortable. Mila left without any long goodbyes or further explanations. The last look she gave Isabel was likely a memory that would be hard to erase for her, though at that moment, Mila simply smiled softly, full of confidence. But for Isabel, that smile felt like a reminder, touching an emotional part of her she hadn't known before. The store returned to its usual calm atmosphere. But within that space, something had changed. Isabel felt a sense of unfamiliarity, as if she herself were standing in a space she no longer fully understood. She couldn't say it was discomfort, but a strange feeling crept into her mind, one she hadn't experienced before. She looked around, trying to regain her usual rhythm, but her gaze couldn't escape the image of that woman. Mila, a woman simple in appearance, yet carrying a powerful presence that didn't need to be flaunted. Chloe, her colleague, still engrossed in her phone, was completely unaware of the subtle change in the store's atmosphere. She didn't notice the difference in how Isabel stared off into space, her eyes somewhat distant, as though she were contemplating something that had just happened. Isabel couldn't shake the unease in her heart, a feeling she couldn't explain. Everything had seemed so ordinary, and Mila, after all, was just another customer like the rest. So why did she feel like she was standing before some kind of change? This thought only made her more confused. Mila walked out of the store with a gentle demeanor, as if doing something very natural. The automatic door slid open, and her figure disappeared into the blinding light of the autumn afternoon, leaving behind a quiet moment in that space. But that moment was like a strong awakening for Isabel. She stood there, watching her figure, not knowing why she felt as if she were hypnotized by something so hard to grasp. That feeling, though hard to describe, made Isabel sure of one thing. It was the feeling of change. Chloe remained oblivious to the shift in Isabel's attitude. She kept scrolling through her phone, catching up on the latest Instagram stories, as if everything was still unfolding as usual. But Isabel could feel that the atmosphere in the store had changed, as if something had been disturbed, and she couldn't simply go back to work as usual. This strange feeling lingered in her mind, refusing to go away. That moment lasted only a few seconds, but for Isabel, it felt like an entire world had opened up before her eyes. She realized that she could no longer maintain the predictable attitude she had always prided herself on. Now, everything seemed much more complex. Mila had done something to her that she couldn't explain, and that made Isabel feel disoriented, as if she had never fully understood this world, never truly realized that change could come from the simplest things. However, when the light from the chandeliers began to calm the tense atmosphere, Isabel returned to her work. She tried to push away the chaotic thoughts in her head, regaining control. But throughout the afternoon, Mila's words kept repeating in her mind like an unforgettable lesson. Mila had said, not in a preachy tone, but in a soft, understanding voice, "Sometimes we don't need to spend a lot of money to appreciate the true beauty of something." Those words echoed in Isabel's mind. They were a deep touch inside her, a place she hadn't thought that the material values she and Chloe always sought could be overlooked, deemed unimportant. She had always thought that money, wealth, and designer goods were the true measure of a person's value. But now Mila's words felt like a wave crashing into values that Isabel thought had been deeply ingrained in her. Everything seemed less clear now. As the store gradually became emptier, Isabel and Chloe continued their work. The store returned to its familiar quietness, the luxurious handbags, haute couture dresses, and high heels standing still, as if nothing had changed. But inside Isabel, everything was different. She felt a turmoil, an ambiguity she had never experienced before. The biggest question still lingered in Isabel's mind. Have I been too hasty in judging others? These thoughts left her confused, as if there were a crack in the values she had built over the years. She began to wonder if she had been too easily swept into this life, without fully understanding what truly mattered. Chloe continued with her work, unaware of the changes taking place in Isabel's heart. She remained, as usual, focused on her phone, unaware that Mila's presence had planted thoughts in Isabel's mind that she couldn't shake. Finally, when the store was preparing to close, Isabel stood alone, looking out the window. The scene outside was still the same as any other day, but inside her, something had changed. Mila was already gone, but her reminder still resonated in Isabel's mind, like an unforgettable lesson, reminding her that a person's true value doesn't lie in money or designer goods, but in their refinement, self-respect, and how they view the world. Isabel couldn't quite define what the change was, but she knew her life had entered a new phase. And as she stepped outside, the space of Lame Zone Eternal would never be the same again. She had learned that, in a world where everything is judged by appearances, what we overlook is often the most important value. A week had passed since Mila first entered Lame Zone Eternal, and Isabel still couldn't shake the strange feeling that lingered in her heart. Everything in the store seemed to continue as normal, but it was Isabel's mood that made everything feel different. She no longer saw things the same way. Even when customers entered the store, she felt as if she were looking at them through a foggy lens, as if everything was no longer as clear as before. Although Chloe hadn't noticed any change in Isabel, Isabel knew she couldn't continue maintaining the facade she had built. The feelings of unease and doubt began to stir within her, as if an awakening was happening from within, though she couldn't pinpoint the cause. Every time someone entered the store, Isabel would wonder whether they were truly worthy of being in this space, or if they were simply there to browse. That question had haunted her for the entire week. One autumn afternoon, as the store was preparing to close and the atmosphere in Lame Zone Eternal grew quieter, Isabel was tidying up the remaining items. She wiped down the counters, lost in thoughts about the events that had unfolded and the changes within herself. But when the door of the store opened, once again, Isabel felt as if the entire world had suddenly come to a halt. And then, as if nothing could be more surprising, Mila walked into the store once more. This time, Mila's arrival wasn't just a return, but a shock that made everything feel unfamiliar and striking. The door opened, and Mila walked in, still carrying the same calm and confident demeanor as before. But this time, everything was different. She was no longer just an ordinary customer. She was no longer the simple woman that Isabel and Chloe had met previously. Mila had changed, and the change was undeniable. Mila wore an elegant, luxurious black suit, but it was never ostentatious. Her outfit wasn't the flashy attire of top celebrities or business tycoons, but it exuded a refinement and perfection that only those who truly understood fashion could recognize. The jacket was skillfully tailored, soft yet structured, and the knee-length skirt fit perfectly, subtly, and impeccably. She still wore her natural hair, but this time, her curls were more carefully styled, creating a perfect balance with her outfit. She didn't need to say anything. Just her presence was enough to make every eye stop. Isabel, for a moment, couldn't hide her surprise. For the first time in all her years of working here, she felt there was something very different about this woman. Mila was no longer just another customer. Every time she entered, every time she took a step, everything in the store seemed to stop, making way for her. Mila's unpretentious beauty and her unflashy confidence made the luxurious store space feel small in comparison. Isabel felt herself caught between a strong contrast, between the world of opulence and this woman, who brought a fresh breeze that Isabel couldn't explain. Chloe, standing at the counter, looked up and stared at Mila with surprise in her eyes. She couldn't believe this woman was back, and this time, she wasn't in simple clothing. She didn't say anything, but her surprise was clearly evident. Chloe had always prided herself on being able to see through every customer, never taken off guard by anyone's appearance. But this time, Mila's arrival made her re-evaluate herself, questioning what she had once judged and categorized in customers. Mila walked straight to the counter, bypassing the display shelves. She paused in front of Isabel, their eyes meeting for a brief moment. But for Isabel, that was a moment full of weight, as if a current had run through her, awakening her from all the thoughts she had previously built up. "Hello, Isabel," Mila said gently, but her greeting resonated in the space like an affirmation. "I'm back to buy a gift for myself." Isabel couldn't help but feel a strange sensation in her heart, but she quickly recovered and, with a polite smile, replied, "Hello, it's a pleasure to welcome you. Are you looking for something in particular?" Mila looked at the shelves, her eyes stopping at a striking red leather handbag. The one Isabel had seen many times, but never noticed anyone paying much attention to. Mila stepped closer, examining the bag closely, her hand gently gliding over the soft leather. "This bag," Mila began, "I think it will make a wonderful gift for myself." Isabel smiled, feeling Mila's confidence once again create a stark contrast. She said, "This is one of our limited edition pieces. Very few people get the chance to own it. I'm sure you'll love it." But Isabel's words didn't prompt Mila to explain or justify anything. Mila looked at Isabel again, without any surprise in her eyes, just a calm and undeniable confidence. "I don't need to prove anything," Mila said firmly. "I simply love it for what it is. My feeling towards this item, and towards myself, is more important than anything around it." Her words rang out like a declaration of Mila's absolute independence. Isabel, for the first time in her long time working here, realized that she was no longer just a salesperson. She was now part of the story this woman was creating for herself. What she said, how she presented herself, made Isabel feel that she could no longer predict everything. Then, when Mila decided to pay, there was no fanfare. She simply took out her wallet, placed a payment card down, without hesitation. While Isabel and Chloe were still stunned, as if trying to understand this woman, Mila completed the transaction and smiled at them. "We all have our own worth," Mila said before leaving. "And sometimes what we find isn't something that can be measured in money, but something that makes us feel true to ourselves." She turned and walked out of the store, leaving an empty space and a profound change in Isabel's heart. When the door closed behind her, Isabel felt as though a part of the world around her had cracked. She knew that what Mila had said wasn't just a casual comment, but a deep lesson that she had never considered before. Chloe stood there, unaware of the change in the atmosphere, but Isabel knew that she had changed. Mila's story wasn't just about buying a leather bag, it was about a shift in perception, in how one sees their own value and the value of others. Isabel was no longer the arrogant salesperson she once was. She was now someone searching for the truth in a world she once thought was solid. Every time Lame Zone Eternal welcomed customers, Isabel followed each step they took, staring at their outfits, bags, and every move they made like a programmed reflex. It was her daily job to analyze, evaluate, and classify. Over the years, Isabel had become a master at judging the value of customers from the first glance. She knew who would spend thousands of dollars on a leather bag, who would just browse and leave, and who would never be able to afford such luxury items. But everything she believed in, everything she had built over the years, was slowly crumbling. The confusion that Mila brought still echoed in Isabel's mind, like a crack she couldn't deny. For the first time, Isabel felt that she was no longer as sure of the world she once considered stable. That day, the store continued to welcome the usual customers. The people who entered, according to the standards Isabel had taught herself over the years, were nothing out of the ordinary. Everything continued as before. But in Isabel's mind, everything had begun to change. She no longer saw everything through the golden lens she had always worn. Every customer who walked in, Isabel would ask herself, "Did I judge them correctly?" This question haunted her mind, a confusion she couldn't shake off. Mila had made Isabel realize something she had never thought of before. She wasn't the only one with the right to judge others. In fact, Perhaps Isabel had been too smug, thinking she could see through everything just by someone's appearance. She had always thought she understood the world and what made a person's true value. But Mila was a reminder that sometimes value isn't something you can see from the outside. It resides in the deeper places within each person. This feeling, though unclear, was very powerful, and it began to change Isabel. She started looking at the customers who entered the store with a different perspective. No longer the sharp classifications, no longer the cold, skeptical gaze at those who didn't wear designer clothes. Instead, Isabel began paying attention to smaller details, the glances, the simple words, and the self-confidence that didn't need to be flaunted. She realized that these people might not stand out immediately by appearance, but they carried an inner value she had never truly seen before. One afternoon, when the store was nearly empty, Isabel and Chloe were preparing to clean up when a woman entered. This time, the woman didn't immediately draw attention, but Isabel felt a difference in her mood. She looked at the woman, not to judge, but to sense something. That feeling, the curiosity and the subtle observation, as if she was searching for different values that she had never noticed before. The woman wore a simple coat, not the expensive designer items Isabel was used to seeing. But she had a steady presence, confidently walking into the store, as if she didn't need to prove anything. Chloe, still standing at the counter, didn't notice the change in Isabel's attitude. She continued with her work, absorbed in her phone, unaware that Isabel was observing the customer with a different, more curious gaze. Isabel moved closer to the woman, not because she could predict whether she would buy anything, but because she wanted to know more about this woman. "Hello, may I help you with something?" Isabel asked, but her voice no longer carried the coldness it once did. It was a genuine politeness. The woman smiled, her eyes showing no signs of unease or worry, just a natural smile. She didn't need to say much for Isabel to feel the self-confidence and calmness in every gesture. "I'm just looking around," the woman replied gently, without any pretension or requests. Instead of feeling like she was dealing with an unworthy customer, Isabel felt she was facing an interesting person. She didn't know what she was looking for, but there was a clear change in the way Isabel saw this woman. She no longer judged based on old standards. Every time this woman moved to a shelf, Isabel would follow, paying attention to small details like the way she looked at each item, as if she was looking for a connection with the product, not through surface-level evaluations. This moment was so different from the previous ones. Isabel realized she no longer had to look at the exterior of the customer to judge their worth. Truly, value could come from things that weren't immediately visible, from subtleties, from feelings that outsiders couldn't easily notice. Though the woman didn't buy anything, she left Isabel with an important lesson. She understood that confidence doesn't come from luxury items, but from within each person. A person's true value cannot be measured by what they own, but by what they carry inside. And this lesson changed Isabel. Instead of judging others by appearance or expensive items, she began seeking other values, untold stories, and people who had not been properly recognized. That day, as the store prepared to close, Isabel stood alone, looking around the space. She no longer felt the same self-satisfaction. Everything in the store had its own value, not just the luxurious items, but also the moments, the lessons each customer brought. She knew she had changed, that she was no longer someone who judged based on material standards. Isabel had learned to see things in a new, deeper way. Chloe, as usual, didn't notice the change in Isabel. She continued living in her world, where everything was measured in material things, where the rich were the ones who deserved respect. But Isabel knew that from now on, she wouldn't be a part of that world anymore. She would no longer just be a salesperson. She would be someone who recognized the value of a person through what was deeper and more enduring. Isabel had changed. She no longer saw everything through the golden lens of wealth. She began to realize that the true value of a person couldn't be measured by money or material goods, but by how we treat each other, how we respect those around us, and how we see them through their true qualities. In the quiet atmosphere of Lame Zone Eternal, everything seemed to be returning to its usual routine. But for Isabel, every passing minute was an undeniable mental challenge. After her encounter with Mila, she felt as if she was being torn apart into pieces, each piece reflecting a new perspective she had never considered. This feeling was not like the usual changes, but a profound transformation, a self-discovery that Isabel could not avoid. Every day as she entered the store, Isabel continued her work, but everything was no longer the same. Although she still did the familiar tasks, standing behind the counter and greeting customers, her mind was no longer firmly grounded in the prideful shell she had built over the years. She couldn't stop thinking about what Mila had taught her, not through words, but through the way she lived and expressed herself. Chloe, the only colleague Isabel trusted and shared the work with, didn't notice this change. She still lived in the world of judgment and self-satisfaction, where wealth and appearance were the only measures of value. Chloe continued her work as usual, criticizing customers based on their items, from their handbags to their hairstyles. But Isabel was no longer like that. She no longer took pride in her ability to classify customers, a skill she had honed over the years. She no longer saw people through their appearance or what they owned, but instead began searching for the true value of each individual. This led Isabel to a decision she had never thought of before: she would change. She would not allow herself to continue living in the world she had created, a world ruled by class discrimination and luxury standards she had once considered right. Isabel realized that she had lived too long in self-satisfaction and judgment, and it had prevented her from seeing the true beauty in people and the world around her. That day, as the store grew quiet and only the sound of Isabel's footsteps echoed, she began reflecting on all the customers she had encountered. The customers she had hastily judged before, the ones she had assessed based on their clothing and the items they carried. She thought about Mila, about how she came and left without needing to prove anything. Mila didn't need to wear a designer bag or expensive clothes to prove her worth. All she brought was confidence, self-respect, and respect for those around her. And that was the great lesson Isabel had learned. But Isabel's decision to change was not easy. She had been used to judging people by their appearance, used to the self-satisfaction of thinking she understood the world. Every day, she still stood behind the counter, facing new customers, but this time, she no longer felt the need to guess whether they could afford anything. Instead, Isabel began to look at them with a different gaze, one full of curiosity and respect. She no longer saw the luxury clothes, the expensive bags, but the stories and the values that each person carried with them. One day, the store welcomed a customer, a middle-aged man in a dark suit, whose appearance seemed somewhat outdated. Isabel was familiar with such customers, those who came just to browse, and she had always judged them as those who could never afford the luxury items. But today, when the man walked in, Isabel didn't look at him with judgment. She observed him calmly, curious about what he might bring to this encounter. The man slowly walked past the shelves, not showing any rush or eagerness, but carefully looking at each item, as if thinking about something important. Isabel didn't approach him immediately as she usually did. She didn't rush to offer invitations or greetings. Instead, she let him be and began to sense what he truly needed. After a while, the man turned back and smiled gently, his gaze warm but without any pride. "Can I help you with something?" he asked, his voice calm and unpretentious. Isabel looked at him and felt a shift in how she approached others. No longer hurried or superficial, she responded with genuine respect. "I'll bring this bag for you to see." She knew he had been eyeing the luxury bag, but she also understood that its value wasn't only measured by money. He wasn't in a hurry, he didn't show excessive excitement, but simply seemed to be looking for something that felt right for him. When Isabel handed the bag to the man, she felt that she was not just selling a product, but sharing a part of the value she had learned from Mila. It wasn't just an expensive item, it was a gift for self-confidence and self-respect. The man took the bag, admired it for a moment, then gently put it back down. "This isn't the item I'm looking for," he said with a light smile, "but thank you for your time." Isabel didn't feel disappointed or sad. She just felt an unusual sense of satisfaction. She no longer viewed him through shopping or materialism, but saw him through what he expressed. A person full of sincerity, with no flashy exterior but great value. That day, Isabel felt a change within herself. She no longer looked at others through the clothes they wore or the money they could spend. She no longer judged people's worth based on material standards, but began searching for spiritual values, the qualities people carried with them. And the great lesson she received from Mila wasn't just a reminder, but a deep awakening to the true value of life, of people, and the world around her. Isabel's decision to change wasn't easy, but she knew it was the right step. She was no longer a cold salesperson, no longer someone living in a world of division and judgment. She had become someone who truly recognized the value of those around her and understood that true value isn't found in luxury goods, but in how we treat each other, how we respect each individual for who they are. That day, while Lame Zone Eternal echoed with the footsteps of passing customers, Isabel couldn't escape the uncomfortable feeling that lingered in her heart. It wasn't because of her work, nor the luxury items she sold every day, but because of herself. The feeling that had been haunting her since her encounter with Mila had turned into a wave of shame, making it impossible for her to control her thoughts. Every time a customer walked into the store, Isabel couldn't stop asking herself the question she had never dared ask before. Have I judged them correctly? The atmosphere in the store, though still maintaining its usual sophisticated calm, felt suffocating to Isabel. Every step she took, every gesture she made while interacting with customers felt strangely off. She felt as if she was living in a shell, a layer that had been built long ago, but now it no longer fit. Every time she looked into the large mirror on the wall, she no longer saw the image of a confident woman, steadfast in the world she had created. Instead, she saw someone struggling to manage the feeling of shame, someone confronting the misconceptions she had maintained for years. Isabel had never thought she would feel shame. She had always taken pride in her work, her ability to distinguish customers, in recognizing who was truly worthy to step into this luxurious store. She always believed that judging others by their appearance, by the items they owned, was the only way to understand their true value. And she had lived in this world for so many years, a world where money and wealth were the only measures. But now, everything had changed. Mila's presence had forced Isabel to confront a reality she had never considered. She realized that she had been wrong. She had focused too much on appearances, on designer items, on the glamour she had once believed was everything. But deep within Mila, in the way she faced the world without needing to prove anything, Isabel realized that value cannot be measured by material possessions. It resides in the qualities within, in how each person expresses themselves and interacts with others. And that realization made Isabel feel ashamed. She felt ashamed for once believing that she could measure a person's worth by material standards. She felt ashamed for taking pride in her ability to classify customers, without realizing she had been living with a narrow perspective for so long. When a new customer entered the store that day, Isabel felt an unusual awkwardness. She looked at the customer, and instead of thinking about whether he could afford the item he wanted, she asked herself, "Will he teach me something new?" These thoughts made her feel confused, as if she was standing between two worlds, the old world she had lived in, and a new world she hadn't fully embraced. Every time a customer came near, Isabel felt she wasn't as confident as before. Her gaze was no longer sharp and judgmental, but instead filled with curiosity, searching for values beyond material things. And this made her feel inadequate, as though she no longer recognized herself. The entire day, Isabel couldn't shake off that feeling of shame. Every time a customer entered and she started to assist, she couldn't help but think about what she had done in the past. She had once looked at them through the lens of class distinction, through the material standards she had set for herself. But now, she realized she had been wrong, that judging people based only on what they owned was a huge mistake. This feeling followed her all day, and when the store was empty, Isabel reminded herself that she needed to change. Not for anyone else, but for herself, because of what she had come to realize about herself. One afternoon, when the store was nearly empty, Isabel stood there looking at the display items. The expensive leather bags, the luxurious dresses, everything still sat quietly in the store, unchanged. But for Isabel, everything was different. She no longer viewed these items with indifference or awe at their material value. Instead, she saw them as part of a world she hadn't fully understood, a world she had long avoided facing properly. She realized that, even with all the luxury items in the world, a person could still lack the more important qualities. And that was the lesson Mila had brought to her. Shame wasn't something Isabel could get rid of immediately. It wasn't a comfortable feeling, it was a painful awakening. But it was this shame that helped her realize she needed to change how she viewed the world. She had lived too long in a world of surface-level judgment, where money and material things were the only measures of worth. But now, Isabel had come to understand that the world isn't always so simple. Every person has their own value, and that's not something she could measure just by the things they carried. That entire afternoon, Isabel thought about what she had done, about where she had gone wrong. She felt as though she had been lost for so many years, and now she had to find the right path. She no longer wanted to live in the world she had created, a world full of judgment and distinction. Isabel realized she needed to change, not just for herself, but for those around her. She didn't want to continue living in falsehood, in the rules she had set, not realizing that she had created an invisible wall between herself and the real values of life. When the store closed at the end of the day, Isabel stood alone, looking out the window. The view outside was the same, but inside her, everything had changed. She knew she had reached a turning point, that she was no longer the person she once was. And that made Isabel feel a sense of relief, as if she had freed herself from a heavy cloak she had worn for too long. She no longer felt shame, no longer felt like she had been wrong. Instead, she felt a new freedom, a freedom to look at the world through different eyes no longer clouded by material standards and distinctions. Isabel couldn't know how everything would change, but she knew that from now on, she would never look at others the same way. She had learned a great lesson from Mila, a lesson she would carry with her for life. And though it might be difficult, though it might be confusing, Isabel knew that she had truly changed. And that made her feel a sense of lightness she had never felt before. After all the changes in the past days, Isabel felt like a completely new person. She walked into the store each day no longer with the mindset of a proud, self-satisfied saleswoman full of judgment, but with curiosity and a sense of relief, as if she were starting over. Every morning, when the doors of Lame Zone Eternal opened, Isabel no longer saw the world around her through the lens of wealth and materialism. She no longer felt that she was the most important person in that space. Instead, she felt like a part of a larger picture, a world where everyone has value, not because they own luxurious items, but because of who they are as individuals. The discomfort and confusion that had followed her in the days after meeting Mila had finally subsided. Isabel no longer felt ashamed of herself, although she knew that the process of change would not be easy. She had learned to face the mistakes of the past, and to view them as part of her growth journey. The view she once had of a person's worth had shattered, and in its place was an entirely new understanding, one of humility and the recognition that no one is perfect, but every person has a story and value of their own. Mila's story wasn't just a lesson about judging people by appearances, but a reminder of how we treat those around us. Mila had taught Isabel that, in a world full of the glow of wealth and materialism, the most important thing is not the luxurious items people possess, but the qualities within them: confidence, kindness, and respect for oneself and others. What Isabel realized was that she had lived too long in a world governed by external things, and it was time for her to change, to view the world through a different lens, one no longer clouded by discrimination and bias. That day, when a customer walked into the store, Isabel no longer felt the self-satisfaction she once had. She no longer felt she was the only one with the right to decide who was a worthy customer and who wasn't. Instead, she simply felt curiosity and a desire to learn about the stories each customer brought. The woman, dressed in a simple black dress, with no noticeable designer items, was not the kind of customer Isabel was accustomed to. But this time, Isabel did not view her through a lens of distinction. She greeted the woman with sincere politeness and eyes full of curiosity. "Hello, may I help you with anything?" Isabel asked, her voice no longer stiff, but warm and inviting, a kind of approach she had never considered before. The woman smiled and responded, "I just want to take a look. Could you show me the bag over there?" Isabel didn't hesitate. She immediately took the bag the woman requested, but instead of simply handing it to her, Isabel began to listen and observe how she interacted with the product. It wasn't with the excessive excitement like other customers, but with a gentle appreciation. The woman didn't focus on the material value of the bag. Instead, she looked at the texture, the design, the fine details of it, as though she was connecting with the item in a very personal way. Isabel stood silently to the side, no longer feeling the rush or pressure of her job. She simply listened, observed, and absorbed everything around her. When the woman decided not to buy the bag and left, Isabel didn't feel disappointed. She hadn't seen the customer's actions through the lens of material value, but through the emotions the customer brought with her. It made Isabel realize that not every shopping decision has to result in a material gain. Sometimes the connection with an item is enough, and not everything should be measured by the money spent. That was the lesson Isabel had learned. Human value doesn't always show on the outside. It's deeply rooted in thoughts, feelings, and things left unspoken. She had learned to respect the simplest things, the most ordinary people, and understand that truth doesn't always lie in the glamour she once trusted. On another morning, Isabel stood looking at the display items, reflecting on everything she had gone through. She recalled the days before, when she always viewed everything through a lens of distinction. She remembered the times she had judged customers without giving them the chance to express themselves. And she also thought of Mila, the strength in the way she lived, in how she faced the world without needing to prove anything. The past few days had helped Isabel realize that instead of seeking material values, she needed to seek human values, the simple things we often overlook. One day, when the store was nearly quiet, Isabel stood in front of the large mirror, thinking about the change she had undergone. She was no longer the self-satisfied person she once was. She no longer felt like she was the only one with the right to judge others. Thoughts of materialism, wealth, and distinctions no longer controlled her mind. She had learned to respect those around her, not because they had money or designer items, but because they were individuals with their own stories, with values that only they could understand. The sense of pride Isabel once felt when standing behind the counter, looking at the luxury items, was no longer there. Instead, she felt relieved, as if she had found a new path. She no longer viewed the world through the eyes of discrimination, but had opened her mind to embrace the true values. She had learned that simple things, ordinary people, were what truly made up real value. And that lesson had changed Isabel. She was no longer the only person in her world, but part of a larger community, where the value of each person is respected and recognized properly. The story of Isabel, with all the subtle transformations in her soul and perception of the world, is not just a journey of seeking change in her job or a new perspective on customers. It is a profound lesson about the self, about how material values, class distinctions, and self-satisfaction can obscure the more important things we often overlook in life. Isabel had once lived in a world where wealth, luxury, and material standards were everything. She had spent her life judging people by their outward appearances, evaluating who deserved to step into the luxurious space of lame zone eternal and who didn't. She had built an invisible wall between herself and those around her, a wall that prevented her from seeing the diversity and depth of each individual. She had forgotten that every person carries their own story, values that cannot be measured by the clothes they wear or the designer items they own. The change in Isabel was not just the result of a brief encounter with a stranger, but a deep self-awareness of herself and the world. Mila, with her simplicity and confidence without the need to show off, became the transformative factor in Isabel's story. Mila didn't need to prove her worth through luxurious items or expensive dresses. Instead, she demonstrated self-respect and peace in the way she faced life. It was Mila who taught Isabel that true value doesn't lie in what we possess, but in how we live, how we treat ourselves, and how we treat others. The great lesson Isabel learned was one of humility and respect. From someone who was always self-satisfied, always giving herself the power to judge others based on appearances, Isabel learned that a person's true value cannot be measured by money or material things. Every person has their own story, experiences, and qualities worth cherishing, even if they don't wear designer clothes or carry expensive bags. The most important thing is the respect and understanding we show to one another, not through material things, but through relationships, feelings, and deep connections. As Isabel began to change her perspective, she no longer felt herself standing above others, looking down on them. She had learned to respect the people she had once hastily judged, and this brought her a strange sense of relief. She no longer felt the need to prove anything. She no longer lived under the shadow of discrimination. Instead, she began to view the world with a fresh perspective, a perspective that was inclusive, open, and full of humanity. Isabel realized that life is not always measured by material success or wealth, but by enduring qualities, sincerity in every relationship, and how we treat others. It was this change that gave the story its profound meaning. The life lesson Isabel received was not just about changing the way she viewed customers, but about changing the way she viewed herself. Each of us has habits, mindsets that have deeply rooted in our minds, and sometimes we don't realize that they might be preventing us from seeing the true values in life. We live within predefined molds, within boundaries created by society and our environment, and we fail to realize that there could be other values we haven't explored. But change, although difficult, can happen at any time, and sometimes it comes from the smallest moments we never expect. A simple phrase, an unexpected meeting, or a surprising event can make us realize we've been wrong. And at that moment, we can stand up and move forward, with a fresh view of life, with an open heart ready to embrace the beautiful things we had overlooked. Isabel's story is also the story of many of us, living in a world where discrimination, materialism, and external judgments dominate. We forget that within expensive items, within luxurious clothes, true human value is not always contained. We often judge others based on what they carry, what they have, rather than looking at their true selves, at the qualities, emotions they bring. This story reminds us that sometimes we need to stop, reflect, and reassess what really matters in life. What Isabel learned after everything she had gone through was awakening. She realized that to live a truly fulfilling life, we can't just rely on external material things to judge human worth. Instead, we need to seek value from the small things, from everyday stories, from the respect and understanding we give to each other. Through changing her perspective, Isabel not only learned how to judge others more appropriately, but also learned to love and respect herself. And the most important thing Isabel learned was the lesson of humility. The world is not always as we think. There are many things around us that we cannot fully understand, and sometimes all we need to do is open our hearts, and we will see a completely different world. A world where everyone has value, regardless of what they carry, where, or how much they own. Humility not only helped Isabel recognize the values she had previously overlooked, but also helped her live a more meaningful life, closer to those around her. Isabel's story is not just a personal lesson, it is a great lesson for all of us. It reminds us that, no matter how complex and challenging life may be, we can always change, we can always learn, and we can see life differently, through the eyes of a sincere person, not driven by materialism or discrimination. And those changes, though small but meaningful, will help us live a better life, not just for ourselves, but for those around us.